Morena everybody, and welcome to the first council meeting of the year, 12th of February 2024. Can't believe we're in February already, it's going pretty quickly. So just a reminder about health and safety. If the alarm sounds, we make our way to the nearest emergency exit, which is probably the one at the back. Assembly point is across the road, and all the roadworks are all being completed and it's looking fantastic. Great job by the staff. So we gather over there and await instructions from the staff. Everyone, just a reminder, this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Reminder to turn off your mobile phones or put them onto silent. Thank you. Shad, can I ask you to open us with a karakia, please?
Kia ora Anne, tātou katoa ko whitahi nei, i tēnei huihuinga tuatahi o te tau, nō reira tēnā koutou. Nō reira me tuku karakia, kia nui tātou. He te atua anei rā mātou whitahi nei, ka tuku rā ngā whakamoimiti, ngā whakawhētai ki a koe, nā ki tia rā tātou i ngā huatangi, ngā take e ora nei. Kia whaihua, kia whaihura hi tika mā tātou katoa. Tēnei mātune, tēnei ki a koe, kōre ki tōna taku. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So we have no apologies. We have speakers in the public forum. Can I ask our applicant Sam Pepper to come forward, and he has Andrew Collins with him from Harrison Grierson. You want to come up to the table here? Thank you. Welcome. And just make sure that your little button is green when you're speaking, and if you just have one mic being used at a time. Otherwise we get interference.
Good morning, Morena. Morning, commissioners and team TCC. I'm Andrew Collins from Harrison Grierson. My client, Sam Pepper from Lansdale Developments. We've got not too much to say. We wanted to come here to let you know that we're very keen for you to be supportive of the staff recommendation that's in your agenda. The plan change request is the culmination of probably 2.5 years of work so far, and a great deal of money invested by Lansdale as well to get to this point. We believe a very thorough job has been done. It's supported by a raft of specialist assessments, and yeah, we believe we've really considered all the matters that are important for urban growth, including, you know, we're going to be keen to adopt the provisions of the medium density residential zone. So in that respect, it'll be similar to your other growth areas, provisions being made for public transport servicing in the form of buses and so on. So that's involved quite careful attention to the landform gradient, as you'd appreciate. We've consulted with local iwi, who directed us to local hapu, and had some good engagement there, and you'll see some supporting assessments there. So I think the history of this, as set out in Mr. Bellamy's report, is that it was actually one of the sites identified back when Council commissioned a Welcome Bay and Ohauiti planning study a few years ago, and it was in fact the only site that sort of made the recommendation stage of proceeding to urban development and the plan change. And at that stage, I must admit, we expected that Tauranga City Council was going to be the proponent of this plan change. Then obviously there were various priorities, and you know, things changed, and Council had to focus on some other larger plan changes, in which case Lansdale took this on as a private plan change. It has been identified for urban development for quite a few years, through the regional policy statement, had it within the urban limits post 21, I think. That of course is now changing with the Regional Council's Plan Change 6, which is removing the concept of urban limits, amongst other things. But it's now that future urban development status, if you like, is now provided for by being in the draft future development strategy, which some of you will have been, well, all of you will have been part of one way or another, but some of you will have probably been on the hearing panel. So that's in the draft as a medium term future growth area expected from 2027 onwards. What that means, though, is that there's no impediment subject to this rezoning happening here for earthworks and subdivision consent processes to happen really from the end of this year through to about 2026, with the first houses hitting in about 2027. So unless Sam wants to say anything, we're really just here to support the staff report, which I believe is to accept the plan change for processing. Should the commissioners be of a mind to do so, we're not averse to council adopting it as their own either. So just put that out there. Thank you.
To make any comments?
Well, simply that it's been a long-winded process so far. And it's cost an awful lot of money. I'll just put that on the table.
Thanks, Chair. Andrew, I'm on page 104 of the plan change request. And in figure 4, it shows for the subject land on the western side with a potential connection to land to the south. I'm just interested in terms of there's no such connection shown on the eastern blocks to the adjoining land to the south. So I was just interested in your commentary around that. And
yes, actually, even the connection on the western side was probably could be regarded as a little bit optimistic in the sense that there's quite large gully system running to the west, but we were keen to provide some level of future connectivity, which is why that is shown. Look, it's something we can still explore further in terms of the eastern side, but we really felt that I don't think that's actually been raised, Commissioner Wasley, before now. So we really felt that on the western side was the main opportunity for connectivity, but that would be a very expensive connection as it is because of the nature of the gully. There's actually gullies, unfortunately, to the west of the western block, as well as to the south of the western block. So of all of the options, that one to the south looked the most potentially practical.
okay, no, thank you. I'll have some questions for the staff around that matter later on. Come to the report.
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 97 of our agenda, there's a paragraph that describes the level of density that is anticipated. And it talks of 20 dwellings per hectare with a total of 470 dwellings all up. But you also mentioned adoption of medium density, and I'm just trying to understand what the implications of that would be in terms of dwellings per hectare and the total number of dwellings.
We've tried to be practical in the sense that although considerable earthworks are proposed within the land, and of the 56 hectares being zoned, only some 24 hectares or so is developable land, that will be subject to considerable earthworks, but despite that, it'll still be quite a, I guess, rolling topography. So there'll be an attempt to do most of the earthworks at a primary stage to make them suitable. But despite that, the need for the platforming when you start getting a lot of terrace kind of houses has its own challenges. So we've done the assessments on a range of scenarios, in the sense it could be higher than that, but taking the advice of our client, the developer, with the 20th, we think is the most likely target density. And we've also taken advice from our urban designer in that respect. So, yeah, had it been a perfectly flat or a more moderately flat site, we could have aimed higher.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we need to provide as many houses as we possibly can, and therefore density is great. But on the other hand, good urban design is an outcome we also want to achieve, and getting that balance right. So I was really just wanting to get some sort of understanding of what your vision, if you like, was. And so it's closer to the 20 than.
It is, thank you. And thanks for understanding that need for a balance. It's quite a juggle sometimes, but yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Just a question too around some of the transport assessment and connectivity out onto State Highway 29 in particular. So there's a number of, there's a balance here. We need more housing, but also need to be cognizant about the impacts, the wider impacts particularly on the transport network. And I'll probably raise it with staff as well. But the assessment's also predicated on upgrades to State Highway 29 at some point in the future. There'll be works on, once we get underway for turret between Welcome Bay and 15th Ave, but also potential upgrades on State Highway 29. So I suppose my question is, the assessments are predicated on those upgrades to occur?
Yes, we did a process of, which if it's not in your report, then it'll be in the supporting assessments, of showing the staging of the development from the first houses in 2027 through to a gradual build out through the eastern block, then the western block, until about late 20, might have been 2039 from memory. So during that time, certainly the transport safety program, if I've got that acronym right, the TSP refresh is underway, which it is, Shad, it is predicated on some of those improvements happening to improve the capacity of the highway in that area. To do our bit, if you like, we understand that the public services like buses are not well utilised in that area, and to the extent that we've made it suitable for the extension of the bus routes, if that adds any critical mass to make that service more viable, then that's a bonus, I guess. But we would be looking for those wider improvements as well.
Anything else? Thank you. My question was the same as Stephen's about density. So thank you very much. Any closing remarks? No?
No, well, I'd like to thank the staff that we've been dealing with. Brad Bellamy's been very supportive along the way, and some of the delays and challenges we've referred to have not been of council's making. Just as with your own plan changes, the legislation's changed, national policy statements change, and it feels like it's one step forward, a couple of steps back sometimes. But no, thank you to staff.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Okay, we have, pen's running out. We have a late item in, thank you, in public excluded. Someone like to move that we accept that? Shad and Bill. All those in favour say aye. Against carried. No business to be transferred from public excluded to open. There's no change to the order of business. That brings us to the minutes of the council meeting held on the 11th of December. Seems like a long time ago. Bill, I think you've got a couple of things to raise.
One matter, Chair, and it's on page 16, and it's the fourth bullet point under discussion points raised in the first line, and it's council in previous times had aggregated responsibility. The word I think I used was abrogated.
E instead of a G. Okay. Anything else in the minutes? Stephen.
I really just wanted to comment on the quality of the minutes. The meetings in December were large, big issues on the agenda. And although they're a long read, being able to go back and actually follow the whole sentiment of the discussion and have them accurately documented, I think is a great strength. So thank you to the staff for doing that. I think it's very helpful. Much appreciated.
Thank you. I think we all echo that, that they were pretty meaty discussions, and to have it laid out from a member of the public's point of view, they can follow through the thinking to the decision, which is often, you might not agree with the decision, but if you can see the thinking, you can understand the decision. The question I had on page 35 was the resolution about a further report on the cost of demolition of the Automortai pool and the future utilisation of the site. I think it would be, just to raise, I think it would be helpful in that report if we had some timing in it as well, because I think that's been misunderstood, that we were going to demolish it straight away, and it's got a few people worried about that. So I think that might help. Okay, nothing else on the minutes? Thank you, Bill, with those amendments, and Stephen, you happy to second? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Conflicts of interest. No. Deputations, presentations and petitions, we have none. No recommendations from other committees. That brings us to the business for today. And first up is the draft statements of intent for our council-controlled organisations. Sanjana, welcome.
Morena koutou. We have 2 CCO papers this morning. So the first one being around the draft statements of intent. For 5 out of our 7 CCOs, we've received the drafts. This is a little bit earlier than the usual timeframes. 4 of them received letters of expectation from us last year, which highlighted community outcomes that we'd like to see in the statements of intent. And the CCOs have all reflected those in their drafts. So happy to take this report as read and receive any feedback.
I think the 2 things that aren't in the recommendations is, one, we need to probably point out in the recommendations we're incorporating the board review, the points from the board review. And secondly, Bill, do you want to talk about?
Yes.
Because you had the conversations. Yes. Okay. You've got some words. Excellent.
Have any particular questions, Chair, on the report, but we had previously discussed the concern that, again, lots of local government process, annual review in terms of statements intent. So I've got some suggested wording, hopefully with the assistance of Christine, in terms of the suggesting a review cycle with a detailed review with year 1 of the LTP, and then a refresh or refinement for years 2 and 3, really just to take the focus away. And unless there's anything of significance, that detailed review really stands, but there's still the opportunity to tweak if required.
Be on a 3-year cycle. So after each refresh of the LTP, first year, because otherwise we just, it's just a continual paper war, isn't it?
And the wording, and can send it to Janie, is approves a statement of intent, development and review cycle of a detailed review aligned with year 1 of the long-term plan, and a refresh/refinement aligned with years 2 and 3 of the long-term plan period. I can flick that to Janie.
You're moving.
So I'll move
The recommendations with that addition.
that addition.
And then Stephen, I think your point was including recommendations from the board review.
Just through the chair, we have added that in.
Yes, I think.
It is mentioned in the specific reports, which I appreciate, but it was really just giving recognition to that in the recommendation.
Yes.
Specifically.
Yep.
Yep.
So is the mover happy to include, so would that be an F note? Is it a note that recommendations from the board review be included in the draft statement and the statements of intent?
That would be fine.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Happy to
position,
include that?
yes.
And you're happy to second it? Anything else? Shad.
Sorry, I just had a quick query. So with the, because we've brought these forward, and I see in the paper where Western Bay are also, from a Tourism Bay planning point of view, for that statement of intent are signing that off, or hopefully signing that off later in the month. With Whakatane, I assume that would be the same. And then yes, sorry, yep, just on that one point.
Stepping in to help. Whakatane have an MOU with TBOT. They're not joint shareholders, so it doesn't have to formally go to council.
Anything more? Okay. How are we getting on, how are we getting on with the transparency?
Sure. So Bay Venues are already leading the way with this, and they're publishing online summaries of their board meetings. Te Manutake Otepapa Limited, they've just started doing that as well since their November board meeting, and we've shared those examples with Tauranga Art Gallery and with Tourism Bay Plenty as well. So I understand that they're considering doing that moving forward. It has been noted.
Very good. If we can get those
Definitely.
doing that by the time we finish, it would be excellent. So the public have a good vision of, good oversight of what they're doing. Yep, well done. Okay, nothing more? It's been moved and seconded with the additions. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thanks very much. Well, then the second paper is the board review. Someone like to move that, Stephen? Bill, any comments, questions? Bill?
Just a comment, Chair. I think the comparison now in terms of the performance, the operation of the CCOs, the relationship between with the CCOs and the TCC organisation, significant improvement to when we started. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that and acknowledge the work and the resourcing now that's available to assist that process. So I think that seems to be working well, both between the council organisation and the individual CCOs. So I just really wanted to compliment all those involved in that.
Thank you, Bill. And just to say as well, having Gareth on the Bay Venues board is extremely helpful. And I know that Chad feels the support and that's been a great move.
I think from the relationship with BVL is just dramatically different, and it allows everyone to get on and do their job.
Further comment, Chair. It was interesting reading in terms of the Govern 365 approach and all of that. And
You're going to run that over councils. Suggestion to local government New Zealand.
so I found that really helpful, and then providing the focus for each of the boards in terms of those key matters. So keen that obviously that carries on and it covers all of the CCOs.
It's a slightly different approach that they take. It's more about organisational health rather than just about the board, which I think the board's found a little bit disconcerting at first, but it is definitely a really positive process that they've gone through.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to plan change 34, Belk Road. Oh, sorry. Philip, yeah, welcome.
Yeah, first day back, so into it. Nothing to report. It's a fairly minor plan change, this one, Madam Chair. And I think probably the important thing is that what we aim to do is to notify it alongside Plan Change 35 for Tauranga business estate extension, because the two tend to overlap, or certainly got one neighbours and neighbours to the other in effect in that way. So from an administration and other point of view, it makes it a lot easier. Spoken to pretty much all the residents in the area. They're pretty comfortable with what's being proposed. So really, yeah, that's it.
And it wouldn't have been a surprise to the residents?
No.
No.
I think probably the biggest concern is what's NZTA going to do with the future state highway alignment, because that is going to affect some of the properties, but that's still an unknown at this point.
Yes. The only comment I was going to make was it's interesting to see NZTA again seem to be out of touch with what's happening locally. It's presumed that their comments around the necessity to rezone is because it's made by sort of Wellington-based bureaucrats rather than people who have local knowledge. But however, it is what it is, a big bureaucracy. Bill.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Philip. Fine with the plan change and support the proposition. I'm just wondering though, in terms of the documentation that goes to the landowners and the various agencies, etc., and you've provided me a segue with it, is whether we just note as appropriate that the notice of requirements yet to be notified, etc., just so that we send a signal that we obviously know it's happening, but it's all part ultimately of a package out there. So just having that somewhere in the material that goes out to landowners.
Oh, right, okay. I thought you planners would have a few more questions. You've got... Okay.
Thanks, Philip. I just see in the report and the commentary that NZTA's preference was for rural as opposed to rural residential. And I assume that was based, I mean, I'm just making an assumption here, based on additional fragmentation, where our view is because of the relationship with the industrial estate, but also as the city continues to move, that we're more comfortable with a rural residential.
That was part of the reason, but the real underlying reason that wasn't really written down was the concern that by turning it to rural residential, it could potentially put the land values up, and therefore they're going to pay more compensation.
Okay. There's always the reason and then the real reason. Okay. And here I thought they were just out of touch. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Anything else? Got to get on and do it. Thank you very much. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thanks, Philip. Destination. Oh, plan change Upper Hawiti. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, everyone. So the report that's been prepared for this is seeking a recommendation, or putting forward a recommendation to accept a private plan change. So we've heard from Mr. Collins and Mr. Pepper this morning, who are the proponents of this plan change. So based on the information, and there has been, as they reported this morning, a lot of work done on this. We're comfortable having reviewed that to put forward a recommendation that it proceed to the next point of notification. The only point I wanted to raise with the panel this morning, or sorry, with the Commission this morning, was that today the Regional Council will be notifying the decisions on change 6. So in my report, I referenced the urban limit lines that existed up until effectively today. And then as of today, those limits, the decision has been to accept the recommendation from the hearings panel on change 6. So, and it's approving the plan change. So, which just for everyone's benefit was a change required by the National Policy Statement on Urban Development and reflecting the responsive planning framework that's set out in that policy statement. So that's just something I wanted to bring to the attention this morning, and happy to take questions, obviously.
Thanks, Chair. I presume you would have heard the question I asked of Andrew Collins, Brad, because what occurs to me, and in terms of a bit of context, the Upper Ohauiti study went as far as the TCC WBOP DC boundary. I think overall, I thought as a sub-region, we had a commitment to boundaryless planning. I suppose the concern I have, and also given as the city grows, and we've had I don't know how many boundary changes since the 89 reforms, and that just going up to our boundaries, I find I have concerns about, because over time that situation changes, and we should have the opportunity in terms of, even if it's not taken up immediately, in terms of that ability to actually connect in land that may not be identified in the private plan change, or indeed maybe in the Western Bay jurisdiction. Because when I look at the map, we seem to be creating on a larger scale another cul-de-sac, of which the chair's often commented on in terms of the situation at Papamoa. So I just have that concern, and Andrew's response indicated it hadn't been a matter that had been considered on that Eastern Bloc. So I'd just be interested in your views on that, looking ahead into the future, not just necessarily with the private plan change. And my final comment, and people have heard me on this before, in my view, it raises the concern I've had around private plan changes and not taking that wider view compared to if a council was promoting a plan change. And I'm not too sure if there was any structure planning undertaken in the wider area. I do understand in terms of the ODP and that covering the subject private plan change area, but it's the need to take that wider view. And I think Shad touched on it earlier in terms of what may ultimately happen, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, in terms of some of the transport connections that go across. So those are my concerns, and how that could be potentially remedied in terms of the plan change being notified and indicating a potential linkage to adjoining land on that eastern side.
Thank you for your feedback, Bill. Yes, there is the difference between the Western and Eastern Bloc, I guess, in essence. The Western Bloc does adjoin the WBOP boundary. So there has been a connection provided for there. On the eastern side, that's not the case. So on the eastern side, there is another block within the TCC land. It has a full frontage to the Upper Ohauiti Road boundary. So in essence, that land that still sits on the eastern side adjoining, which is in TCC jurisdiction, actually has frontage to the Upper Ohauiti Road, which as part of this plan change is being significantly upgraded by the applicant. So in fact, what we're seeing is a change from a rural road design up to a full urban design, footpaths, etc. So there is a lot of potential there for that connectivity to still occur. Further beyond that, this block only has frontage to a quite a significant stormwater reserve on the eastern side, that then joins on and was delivered as part of the Adler Drive SHA area. But importantly, as Mr. Collins also pointed out, the extent of earthworks and the dynamic around some of the overland flow paths has led them to the point where they have with their design on the eastern block. I don't disagree that connectivity is obviously very important, and why, in fact, we pushed for the western block to have the connection that's shown. The eastern block, there were other alternatives we felt, so that wasn't explored.
It up a little bit further. So on the east, really the constraints are that you've already got a developed subdivision, the special housing area being Adler Drive. So a connection further east sort of just runs you straight into that subdivision, but very difficult to achieve because of the escarpments and the stormwater infrastructure that's in place. There will, if the city was to further expand to the south or needing further connections over towards Kaitimaka Road and into Welcome Bay, there are options further south, further up Ohaueri Road. They are all very difficult from a topography perspective. But we really felt through that Welcome Bay and Ohaueri study that the primary need for future connectivity was more connection out of Welcome Bay and Ohaueri back into the city. And that's where this plan change provides that potential kind of corridor to the west. There are also other options that we are pursuing and investigating at a high level at the moment, which we can provide some further information on, probably separate to this discussion today. But safe to say that this won't preclude further connectivity to the east in future.
The only other point I was going to mention is that during the course of this plan change development, Western Bay have plenty contacted us with development plans that have been put to them further south or up Ohaueri Road. And as Andy has just pointed out, there was connections that TCC pointed out that have provided connection to the east at those locations that were far easier to achieve than anything through quite challenging and particularly important stormwater connection areas through this side.
So Bill, that's that land play submission that you'll be considering through smart growth, correct? Yes.
What about the connection? You've picked up the Adler Drive, but immediately to the south. And I suppose it's highlighting an example of my concern, perhaps a lack of that overview at a high level structure planning perspective in terms of what's happening beyond immediate plan changes and those types of things. So
You can see, I don't know if you can actually, but I'm looking at an aerial or a plan of it. You can see the Ohaueri Adler Drive subdivision, the special housing area, is a cul-de-sac. And when that was created, we went out on site and looked at the land further to the south and assessed its future development potential, which would only, it is quite constrained and difficult land from a topographical perspective. By no means anywhere near flat, and probably not suitable for residential development. And so that's why the decision was made at that time that the special housing area didn't need to make a connection into that or allow for a future connection into that block, if that assists.
are there any pedestrian or cycle connections? I suppose just putting the vehicular ones to one side, but it's about doing development that's connected without needing to come back on to the Ohaueri Road. So it's making sure there are those internal connections of one form or another.
So at the moment, we've obviously got a level of detail to support a plan change without the detail of subdivision design. The urban design assessment does indicate and show the importance of that, those types of connections. I think that we're in a position where we can certainly put that type of suggestion back to the applicant to try and turn their mind to those types of options. I don't think the door's closed on that whatsoever. So
I would support that, Chair.
Now then. The only question I had was around the density. It's really disappointing to see people still coming with 15 to 20. You know, that is so out of date in today's world. And I accept, but it's all about cost for them, isn't it? But it's not about the reality of today when we need as many houses as we possibly can. And Bill's right. I hate looking at a plan that's got 2 cul-de-sacs. But, appreciate the difficulties.
Yeah, that point taken, absolutely. One of the matters that we've been trying to get greater levels of clarity around have been density. The reality is that obviously, as you heard, the topography, the further up this road you go is very challenging. But also the further up you go, the further away we get from important services that probably support the level of density that sorts of you probably would like to think could be delivered. So there is a balance to be reached, and I heard that word earlier today as well. And in terms of excuse me, what this is able to achieve compared to, or what this enables, importantly, having the medium density residential, it doesn't close the door on that. So there's those opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? I think the other issue that was raised because we had the Tauranga business estate was around costs and who bears the costs. And the discussion that we had at that time was that that was an essential for the city. It had come through smart growth. We needed to expand our industrial, and in fact, I've had to write to the minister this last year and admit that we haven't got sufficient and we won't have sufficient. So I think that was a slightly different case, whereas this, it's quite clear that the private benefit is with the developer and the landowners. So it is a private plan change, so they should quite rightly bear the costs of it rather than the general ratepayer. And perhaps you might want to think about how we could encapsulate that in a policy that gives better, clear guidance. Don't need to do it today, but it would help you, obviously, because you're unsure of our thinking. But I think where it's an essential change that logically the council should be making for itself, then we accept that there is some sharing of costs because someone's gone ahead and done it. But where this is just a landowner, just typical landowner deciding that they're going to go for a subdivision, whilst we do want to encourage it, I think Bill would rather that we were doing it, but they should then bear the costs. Any further?
A question, Chair, to Brad and Andy. In terms of then having those discussions with the private plan change proponent around them looking at the issue of connections to, particularly on that eastern side, do you need a resolution for that, or do you have sufficient to pick up that in terms of discussion?
So the Act actually allows through a private plan change for those discussions to occur, because technically once the council's in a position to accept the plan change, it actually directs the council to go away and prepare the plan change with the proponent. So effectively what we would be doing, even though that in this case a lot of the work has already been done, we'd be looking to work with the proponent of the plan change to bring on board some of those matters to then work to notification, which there is a resolution around notification. Thank you.
Just, I'm happy with that. What's the indicative time frame for notification?
So at this point in time, obviously, we will still have to do our pre-notification requirements. As you heard this morning, they have done a power of work with local iwi and hapu on this job. It's been really quite an exciting piece of work because a lot of areas have been identified, so it's really great. So we'll still provide the opportunity for that feedback. We're looking at probably 4 weeks, so hopefully at the start to middle of March, we'll be looking at notification.
Sorry, I just had another question that was around some of the slope hazard work that we've done, and just wanted to make sure that that's being fully accounted for. I know that there's going to be a whole lot of earthworks and modifications done to hopefully mitigate some of that stuff, but yeah, I'd just be interested in your comment on slope stability.
There has been a considerable amount of work done in that space. You'll notice that in the report that talks to less than half of the site being developable, and this is the third iteration of that outline development plan with the zoning shown. So a considerable area has been set back, yes, notably because of stormwater related reasons, but because of slope in particular. So there has been multiple geotechnical assessments provided, but more to update and refine some of those areas. So in essence, there's a lot of detail, more detail probably in this plan change than I've ever seen. It's probably more akin to a resource consent, but that's the way they've gone, and it's appropriate in this instance.
Second, planners are happy. Moved by Bill, seconded by Shad. No, no. Recommendations as they are, A to D.
Yes, no, I'll second it.
Okay. Anything further? Did he say houses? If it all goes well, 2027? Yeah. Add those to the list. Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks very much. Destination Skate Park.
If I could just start by offering up Amanda's apology. She couldn't be here with us today, but yep, Alison's in the here, so she'll introduce the paper. Thank you.
Morena koutou. So the destination skate park at the Mount is coming along really well, progressing really well. It's going to be spectacular when it's finished and open, so we're really looking forward to that. Council has previously approved for stages 1 and 2 to be completed based on the external funding that we've received. Stages 3 and 4 had been put forward relying on further external funding, which we have been lucky enough to secure. So asking for council to consider increasing the budget this year so we can finish in time. From a construction point of view, it makes sense to continue while the contractors are on site, and they've indicated that they can do that. So if the budget becomes available alongside the additional external funding, the skate park would be complete and open by mid this year.
Yes. You're very smart getting all that external funding, really. You sort of feel like we've been led along this path.
Just adding to what Alison has said is that the extra funding was in the draft LTP,
Right.
but because that's only draft, so it's not an adopted policy, that's why we're seeking the funding this year, and we will be deleting that money out of the draft LTP.
And we have that money available in this year's budget? Is that instead of something else?
We're seeking an increase in this year to finish the project.
Where's the money coming from?
New money? Sorry, do I understand the question?
Adding
We have
into
got,
this
yes, we're
year's
adding
budget.
into this year. We've got the 50% or 55% from other organisations, sponsors. So we're seeking the extra money this year, but deleting that 850, I think it was, out of the draft LTP for next year.
I understand that, but I don't understand where the extra 800, whatever it is coming from this year. Is it coming from your budget?
We're requesting extra money to.
Yes, I know you're
Yes.
requesting extra money. I'm asking where it's coming from.
Oh, yes, out of our budget.
Where
Yes,
it's coming from.
out of our budget, yes.
Yeah.
We're asking
So
for
it'll-
our
it'll-
budget to be increased.
It'll be
Yes.
debt funded though, out of that budget.
So you've got to not do something else?
No, we're looking for more, please.
That's,
Yeah, for clarity, it's a request for more money, which would increase our debt funding this year. But as Barbara alludes, it wasn't a draft, so that'll come, the LTP will come down by that amount. Yeah.
I shouldn't have asked too many questions, should I? Shad.
Sorry, it was just probably along the same line. So as I understand it, in the draft, that was for 25. 2025. So essentially, we're just bringing that draft forward to this year.
Technically,
And then-
yes.
Technically, but
Technically.
you can't do it. No. It is looking great. I have to say, it is looking great. And you've got the, as I say, you've been smart and got the extra money, so it makes sense to continue it. Any other questions?
Happy to move, Chair. I think it's makes sense to get on with the job. Does mean debt earlier, but only by a year.
And you're, so moved by Stephen, seconded by Bill. Anything else? There's transport costs to go in as well, isn't it? On top of it for the whole project. But that's all budgeted for, yeah. Okay, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Done. Traffic and parking bylaws.
Morena Sato, transport resolutions, generally minor changes for safety and operational reasons. Predominantly related to changes along Millers Road with the Te Kura o Mānunui, the new school there, which is looking beautiful. And the Bureta Vale intersection. So they're the sort of main drivers for the changes here. There's some around Bellevue and Windsor Road safety improvements as well.
I think the thing that worried me, there's an awful lot where we've put the lines in, but we haven't done the bylaw. So are you digging into all of that? Because there might be people
we
who
are.
have been
They're-
ticketed and
Yeah, I have a similar reflection.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them coming up, and similarly with the bylaw on Cambridge Road as well. So there are a few that are being unearthed that we're tidying up.
expect to see a few more. Be good to get them all tidied up. Chad.
Thanks, Nick. I also had thinking about Millers Road, and I saw the commentary in the media, must have been before Christmas or just after Christmas, about the removal of car parking, I suppose. I mean, you can see all the improvements and it looks great, particularly outside the school, the bi-directional cycleway, and safer access, I think, for the kids getting to and from school. But I did see that for that commercial area down the bottom of Millers Road, concerns about the removal of car parking, and I assume it's probably their workers parking out on the road. There is car parking available for customers inside that commercial area. But I suppose my question is, how much consultation and engagement did we have with that particular commercial area through these changes?
Yeah, there was probably more information rather than consultation and engagement. There were some earlier connections, but that development was approved on the basis of providing car parking off the street, and I was a little bit intrigued by the attention to that, because I haven't often seen a lot of cars parked at the bottom of Millers Road on that side. But you may well be right that it could be some of the workers there that took that opportunity. You wouldn't have to go far around the corner to find all-day parking if you wanted to. And for custom, the intention is that it's the on-site car parking that's to be used. That was the planning and approval process.
Okay, anything else? Bill, moving, Chad seconding. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Brings us to 15th, to Welcome Bay. Oh no, temporary road closures, sorry. Is it temporary road closures?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So these are updates to the operation of the closures after more detailed planning was done. So I think it was in November last year, it's in the paper somewhere, we approved the closures for the season, and then planners have gone into a little bit more detail. These are the people that are actually planning for the events and not necessarily us. They've realised that they need some tweaking of timing, etc., for the temporary traffic management. So this is also relatively straightforward.
I just, the only thing I note, the Mount Maunganui Residents Ratepayers Association raised it with me, and I see in the submissions that the Mount Business Association is also raising it. There's a lot of events on at the Mount and a lot of road closures affecting their businesses, and they ask that we, and it's more for the events team probably than the transport people, but that we just keep an eye on it, that we don't close both sides of the street for long periods of time. It does affect their businesses.
I'm
Just
taking
to
notes
be-
here when I
I'm
see
sure
Barbara.
they're mindful, but it's coming up again and again, so it's obviously something that is disturbing them.
I don't know to that. Thank you.
Anything else? You move, Shad's moving, Stephen's seconding. All those in favour say aye. Gets carried. Okay, now we've got 15th Ave to Welcome Bay. Jason, morning.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Shall I, just by way of introduction, this is obviously an important project for us to ease the congestion along 15th Ave Turret to Welcome Bay, between Welcome Bay and the city centre, in order to keep continuity and moving to a July 25 construction start at our risk. We would like to seek the funding off our books, like I said, at our risk, to keep it moving for a number of months.
Correct. That's from March through to September at the moment, where we have a funding gap where WK will not be in a position to approve this funding until at least September. So this paper is really just to outline what works that we need to do, which is detailed design and look at the white fronted turn rehabilitation and keep that moving through until we get that approval from WK, hopefully, as I say, in September.
This is another example of the bureaucracy of Waka Kotahi and the length of time that it just takes to get everything through. For me, this is such a critical area in our city for congestion. And I also think there's some urgency around the timing for the white fronted turn.
Yeah, it's based on their habitat, obviously, and we do have a cut-off period where we need to do that assessment and obviously get them underway with that move.
Yeah, so moving their nests for the next nesting season. So for me, we've just got to take the risk, I think. It is a risk. It's not a huge risk, but I think to keep faith with people that we're at least doing everything we can to move this through. We've just got to get on and be ready. Right. Oh, good, good. Any further discussion? Shad.
I just want to make a comment on in terms of how long this corridor's been jammed up for. It's been kind of years in the making. So actually to make some traction and push on, I think, is what we need to do. But I also want to commend, I suppose, just in terms of the feedback I've seen about the engagement with community, the getting feedback around the options that we've landed on. It sounds like it's been a great process to kind of work through. So, yeah.
Thank you.
If we make the construction start in July 25, what's the estimated finish time?
It's a 2-year project. Yep.
27, okay. All right, thank you. Anything further? All those in favour say aye. Gets carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Arterial road review.
Thank you.
Is that you?
Yeah, that's me. I was meant to have a bit of support here, but they haven't shown yet. So I think we're going a little bit better to schedule than I had anticipated. But I'll box our corner as well as I can and see what happens. Yeah, so we're asking basically for an authorisation to start detailed design on some network improvement to seek better transport throughput. It's something that we started a conversation about a couple of years ago. We've done a significant investigation on, I think it is nearly 50 kilometres of the arterial roading network and found some worthwhile improvements to the network. Surprisingly, we found many that were not so many actually that were related to efficiency. I guess that's telling us that we've kind of squeezed not almost as much out of it as we could in the first place. So that's a lot of it has been done already, but there are about 25% of the issues identified are network improvements that we can go and do at relatively low cost. So there's no land purchase required or shifting properties or anything like that. So, and then around 60-65% of the improvements in the review are unfunded. So it just goes to show that this is an important initiative to improve the throughput at those locations because it doesn't fit into the standard approval process of the government policy statement. So this is another instance where it's fully funded by us. And the third point I wanted to make is that these are congestion easing improvements, and they were generally given higher priority in terms of to improve the throughput, but not at the expense of road safety. So there's a bit of a balance we need to find in speeding cars up, but not making it more unsafe for other modes. So that's how we've sort of taken that into consideration.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't think it cuts it.
No.
No. So for me, looking at that map, I mean, I understand that the NZTA definition of an arterial is a certain amount of traffic. But if I was just, I mean, and I know, I still get emails from people about Ocean Beach Road saying that it isn't an arterial. So if I was a member of the public going to try and find out, is my road an arterial, and I looked at this map, this is our residential map. I mean, it's really hard to follow. And I guess what I was looking for from this was, what are the major routes that people are using to move around the city? Where is the bulk of the traffic that is congesting, that is adding an extra 20 minutes or to people's journeys, in some cases is stopped, and identifying those major routes. And then I guess I think I was I was looking for a bit of entrepreneurial thinking, the same as we've been saying about cycling. We know that if you take a road like Ocean Beach Road, to try and get more traffic in that road, you've either got to get rid of all the parking and use the whole width of the road, which we know isn't acceptable to residents, or you've got to buy land and add on to it. So that's hugely expensive. And again, the city can't afford it. So then what are the alternatives? Where is the alternative that people can use? And we know through B2B, they use Links Ave and wound their way through Concord or Gulf or whatever. So the first question I have really is, do we know what's happened since B2B has been completed? It's not 100% finished, but is actually the traffic is able now to move through B2B, and how has that affected roads like Ocean Beach Road, and what do we see the growth with those with the remaining land in Papamoa that we know is still coming to market? What do we see with the growth, and how do we think it's going to work over the next 10 years? And then we just had the update on Hewlett's Hull Tortora, where a lot of the work to ease congestion in that area is on us and needs to be done before there's any talk of flyovers, etc. So that's what I thought would be in here, like joining up of Mayor Street, some of those sorts of things because over the next 10 years, we've got that Gantt chart of those major projects. This city in that 10 years is going to be at a standstill. If we don't do something, some small things that we can do to ease congestion, we've just got to get on and provide some alternatives whilst all of those are happening, because the growth is continuing. People are still continuing. We might see some mode shift to public transport, but it's going to be slow and it's going to be small. So I was really looking for this 20 million to make. I mean, I think some of the things you've identified in that with the low cost, low risk money and our money, we should be looking to lever as much as we can out of NZTA. But I just think we shouldn't be doing any walking and cycling with it. It should be totally used with a focus on reducing congestion. And if that means getting cyclists off it by providing an alternative, then that's what we should be doing, so that we create an extra lane or something. But I really think there's too many arterials in here, and they're not our major routes. We need to be identifying those, and then a bit of lateral thinking and working alongside those big projects that we know are going to make a difference, and looking to see whether there's things we can do earlier that will help with that. Does that make sense?
I think I understand, and I do agree that there's probably a bigger picture that could have been represented in the paper, how all of this fits in with the major projects that are happening in the city as well. That could have been represented better here, but the focus on this has been on those low cost, low risk improvements that we can find still on the network. And like I said, the congestion easing improvements have been prioritised in our ranking. And then we get to some other ones where there's like a section of a footpath missing, for instance, on the way to school, which makes it less attractive to send your kids walking to school. Which is then categorised as a safety project. And so what we've said is that those projects that are easy for us to get to, that are more safety related, but they can then have flow-on effects on the number of people using vehicles, we go ahead with them. And the other prioritisation in the safety space is if we're doing a project adjacent for another reason, if we're doing a reseal or an area-wide treatment or an intersection improvement that has got associated safety improvements, we do them then because we're there anyway. So but all of this
I
is in the low
understand that, but it
cost,
sounds
low
like
risk.
we're fiddling while Rome's burning.
Yeah, well, we are because the major changes to the network are in these major projects.
Yeah,
they are in Hewlett Hull Tortora, and you're right. We will have a massive demand on our organisation and the city to make those happen early.
So where is Mayor Street in here? Where's Gloucester Street that we know would provide that link up through Papamoa? So it's those sorts of projects I was looking for. With that broader sort of thinking, how do we, until those other big projects are done, how do we give some alternatives? Because drivers will find the rat runs. We know that. What we're trying to avoid is more Links Ave, where those residential streets are just overrun, and then you have major safety problems.
Yeah, that's right. So and both of the roads that you're mentioning, they are in that in the bigger picture plan, not in the low cost, low risk.
Here.
No, they're not in here, and that's why I'm saying we could have connected this report better to the bigger picture to give you a fuller picture. This has sort of focused on on the arterial review that we did on that low cost, low risk aspect.
Well, I guess then what I'm asking for is what does that bigger picture look like, so that we can put that alongside the Gantt chart, because we know approximately the timeline of those major projects, and then the arterial review I thought would sit underneath that. So what are we going to do in the meantime whilst all of that is happening in those various areas? Because we know, for instance, okay, so we're looking at 2027 for Harini 15th, and it'll be 2027 probably before anything on State Highway 29 starts, and then we're probably looking out in 2030 before anything is in Hewlett's Hull. So what are we going to do in the meantime? So that Gantt chart, and then underneath it, beyond the low cost, low risk, what are we doing to ease congestion? Some of which will be the low cost, low risk, but some of the other things we should be looking at with our TSP. I guess that's where I'm going.
Sorry. That is work that I feel that we have connected. It just hasn't been represented in this report. PEI is another good example. You mentioned the expansion of Papamoa.
Yeah.
The PEI intersection, the Papamoa East intersection will be an obvious improvement to take people out to the highway to come into town. So there's stuff like that's
Right,
happening that we haven't connected in this report, but through the TSP piece of work they are.
So I guess having read through that box full of submissions and out talking to people, the thread coming through is the city's congested largely because of roadworks, and because the council hasn't done the work in the past to cope with the growth that we've got. So those are very clear messages coming through from the public. So if I'm Joe Public sitting out there, what am I looking at? This doesn't do it for me. What am I looking at? Because you're going to fix a few more footpaths, and you're going to have a few more cycleways, and actually I'm sitting in my car in congestion, which we know is going to get worse in the next 10 years, and you're not doing anything. I can't see that big picture as the public.
Yeah, so that brings us back to the TSP, and this, which is the process, the standard process for Waka Kotahi contribution, the business cases, the this is a different initiative, and that we said 2 or 3 years ago, what can we as a council, regardless of Waka Kotahi, other funding contributions, what can we do to the network to get it
Not
moved?
enough is the message
But
I'm
that's-
saying.
We've
You're doing
we've
well,
had a lot of
but you're
clever
not doing
people
well enough.
working on this.
One of the questions I'd have is where is that suite of projects that are within the TSP that will deliver what the chair is after? How far through the planning process, and are those projects still, if you like, within the framework of the new government's policy direction?
Your guess is as good as mine. Sorry, but we just don't know at the moment. I'm
we do
afraid,
know.
but we have an indication.
We have an indication.
that's right.
They are trying to resolve congestion in our big cities.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the one thing we could do here is to sit on our hands and wait until the new DPS comes out, because that may be an opening to get some funding contribution for these projects. So it's not $20 million out of our books.
But I think we've got to do the work beforehand. Surely we should be doing the work beforehand, regardless of how it's funded, as to what are the things that will make the difference. Small things, big things, not big things, but what are the things that will make the difference over that construction period of our major projects? There'll be bits around the edges. And then whilst we're doing that, we get the new GPS and we can have a look and see what's able to be funded. So then you can prioritise based on your actual funding.
So the situation is we've been working for 18 months, 2 years in some cases, on developing plans and designs for projects that this new policy direction will now no longer fund. One of the questions we have, I think, from you is if that funding is available, should we continue to deliver those projects? Because they are generally around cycling and walking and safety as opposed to reducing congestion and expediting greater traffic flows. So if the direction, if you give us is to, if you like, temper our approach or wind back those projects because the funding's no longer available or the co-funding, then we need to focus our energy on what might be low risk, low cost and or shovel-ready projects that align with the new policy statement. And that's a process we're going to have to go through.
Stephen.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the tides are changing. We've got $20 million, which to me was specifically targeted at reducing congestion. It wasn't a walking and safety. There's plenty of money been around over the last wee while for walking and cycling, and we've taken advantage of that as we should have done, and we've done a lot in that area. What we need to focus now on is what can we do, and it may well be existing TSV projects that have issues on the margin that haven't been taken into account that would make a difference. Or because when I read through the report, there are quite a lot of assumptions that certain work will be undertaken under XYZ project. We need to be sure that it will be, and if not, can the $20 million make sure that it is? Those are the sort of questions I think we should be focused on, and I'd be looking to leverage another 20 million out of NZTA by focusing on those projects that are priority for the government. I think that's the best use of the $20 million rather than proceeding now with a whole bunch of nice to have but reasonably marginal in terms of our decongestion benefit. And even if we are investing in walking and cycling out of this money, I want to know what the decongestion benefit of that walking and cycling project is. So if we are taking cycles off a main arterial and it frees up, then it's probably worthwhile doing that. It's not just a walking and cycling project in that case. So I think we can do better with this money, and I think a bit of a tie-ho right now, and get a very clear, we can do the work in the meantime and get a very clear steer from central government and try to leverage what funds come through there.
Thanks, Stephen. We must have good data across the city on the routes that people use, the major routes that people use, and that are congested. Because we're dealing.
Yeah, we have very, very good data on that. Yeah. We have everything we need to know. One option then may be that we go away with that instruction and come back with a list of a number of the congesting promoting projects and just decide projects specifically that they may fit in with the new government policy that keeps us moving, right?
We can't sit still.
I just don't want to go back and reanalyze this because the whole that would just
you've got a number of projects.
There's a number of projects here that are really worthwhile that will do what you're asking for.
That's right. So the rest of the money we then want focused on what are the other things that we can do.
Yep.
Some of them will be around the edges of those big projects because those big projects are targeted at some of the worst congested areas. So let's have a look because it's very clear if we come to sit and talk with the government about funding those big projects, expediting those, they're going to ask the question, what are you doing? What are you doing? We need to be able to put on the table. This is where we are.
That's okay. And when we've come back with a priority congestion related projects, half a dozen or whatever, I don't think there'll be much money left of that 20 million anyway. So we might be landing in a good spot.
I'd also think about how do we give that big picture to people that they understand? Because to most people, the TSP means absolutely nothing. like UFTI, have no idea what it means.
I hear you, and the conversations we've had with our partners to get some messaging out around that and try to explain and sell the concept and try to explain that the future of transport for the city need to look different, and what does that look like and what does it mean to people. It's been a laborious process.
It needs to be elevated up to the governance level, and then you might get a bit more. Stephen.
Chair, on that, I mean, we had a conversation in the development of the draft regional transport policy meeting on Friday last week. And my concern was that the regional land transport plan draft, admittedly it's in draft form, largely painted a picture that congestion's a problem, and we all know that, but it didn't really seriously describe the gravity of the existing congestion, let alone what we're heading to. And that's the thing. There's a sort of a naive belief in the community that, you know, the council and NZTA should simply get on with these projects and fix all these roads and build a whole lot more, and everything's going to be okay, and that it's all fundable. Well, the reality is precisely inverse of that. The agencies are doing as much as they can within the budgets they can, but actually that budget is nowhere near sufficient to deal with the level of congestion the city is facing. And that's why we're getting pushback on things like road pricing and other initiatives to raise revenue, because people are in the false belief that we can make do with what we've got. And that story has not been told. I've looked at projections that show that there'll be a 40% increase in Tauranga's traffic over the next 20 years, and we're not really planning to expand the size of our roading network to cope with that 40% increase. There's a city the size of Rotorua coming to Tauranga over the same time period. And if you think of the road network that Rotorua requires, that's what we should be adding to our transport system. We are a country mile away from getting anywhere near that, and we do not have the ability to fund that on the current regime. That's the sort of problem statement that the community need to clearly understand so that they can adequately engage on how we deal with solutions. But at the moment, we tell this mediocre story that if we just keep on eking the current process, we're going to get there. Well, we ain't. And so I think there's a desperate, ready to your point, and I'm sorry to rave on, but I think it's absolutely critical that we tell the gravity of the situation to the community so that they can embrace it and help us collectively solve it.
I think where we're heading is we're going to withdraw this paper and rewrite it. Is that right? Is that where we're going? Or do you want to be able to go ahead? Do you want to be able to go? See, if we give you the okay to go ahead with the projects that you've identified, there might be others that actually would take a higher priority. So maybe we just. I think we've got to hold on. I think just leave it on the table.
Perhaps if you just receive the report and don't adopt the other resolutions, the very clear message is that we need to report back to you with a refined list of key projects that will decongest some of our arterials.
Okay. Your move? Your second? Stephen moved and Bill seconded that we just received the report. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, loud and clear. Thank you.
Those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. I mean, it's a good discussion to have. It's a good discussion to have, especially, you know, as we're heading into that LTP. Because it's just very clear from the submissions that Stephen's right. People don't understand. They think we should stop the roadworks. I'm not sure how that fixes anything. And just do the work that should have been done over the last few years. And it's just, and everything will be dandy. Just very frustrating. Very frustrating. Okay, speaking of traffic, next item is city centre movement framework. Tom and Sean.
So the paper is a request to adopt a revised version for a trial, or we call it a pilot, actually, and endorse the implementation for the city centre movement plan.
Kia ora, good morning, Commission, Exec. This follows on from a series of Commission check-in, check-ups over the last probably 6 months as we have shaped this up and responded to different rounds of engagement with stakeholders and community, and applied detailed information from modelling and surveys as Cameron Roads come online, and we've understood more about the parking, pedestrian, cycling and general traffic movement within the city centre, and applied what information we can obtain in advance or anticipate in advance about the construction movements that will be required for the everything from Te Marawa Taki Otapapa to Northern Quarter and other city centre developments over the coming years. And just before Sean gets into the detail of it, just to really echo what Nick said about it, a very important aspect of this is that under the local streets rule, we have the ability to conduct a 2-year trial period through which we will conduct continued regular engagement sessions with stakeholders and public. We can adapt as we go during that 2-year trial period. It doesn't reset the 2 years when you make an adaptation during that period, but it allows us to demonstrate listening, responsiveness and adaptability to achieve the best and most accurate outcome for the future or the confirmed long-term future option 2 years from now. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that of that 2-year period at the moment ties in very nicely to the delivery of stage 1 of Te Marawa Taki Otapapa and ensures that we are at a good stage of providing permanent streetscape, permanent road layout around that precinct and to support other areas of the city centre with the introduction of that precinct.
Okay, I do think that we should be calling it the City Centre Enabling Movement Pilot Project, so that it's up there that it is a pilot in the name of it. A couple of questions I have, and then I know my colleagues have some. You've left out the parking in Cliff Road. Was that just an oversight, or is there something happening I didn't know about? We didn't know about. Was it outside the?
It was outside of right at the moment. So no, that was an oversight and we haven't got the final vision of what in particular outside of the road reserve is happening in that end of town at the moment.
I just think from an optics point of view, it's better to have more car parking, or in the car parking that's there, it would be better to show it.
No, we'll make sure that that's added in.
And there's something else, but I know I can't think what it is. But Bill, you had some.
Thanks, Chair. Probably more of the way of comments, but I think it's just also recognising that the focus on movement has occurred previously, because in terms of Park Street and McLean Street are two good examples where there has been one way put in place and in my view quite successfully implemented, but also at the same time providing for some of those amenity improvements. What I do think is critical is the pre-implementation communication and awareness, and also the implementation signage, etc. One thing that used to frustrate me was going along Devonport Road and all of a sudden, instead of the pre-warning, a street was closed or whatever. So it's making sure that those who are using the city centre are well aware of what's coming up as opposed to just when they get to a particular point where the movement has changed. So I'm really keen in terms of the focus on that space. And also as part of that, we do need to improve and actually have some of the streets having signs, so you actually know what street you're in or looking for. So, but that's just by the by. And I think the other important part is that messaging around the tactical approach to recognise in terms of we're doing this, obviously with a longer term view, but certainly to cater for redevelopment and construction in the city centre. And I think really doing as much as we can for people to be aware and understand that particular reasoning. And I do support the chair's comment in terms of making it very clear in terms of being that pilot project. So supportive of what's proposed, but I just think we've got some, I think, key challenges in terms of the messaging and communication as we go forward on this. And part of that messaging too is balancing where we're trying to support city centre development, but also to get good amenity in place to allow people to access it in a variety of modes. So that's my commentary.
Thank you. Yeah, echo Bill's comments. Yeah, we do need an amazing comms plan engagement with our community, but also with our retailers, with the businesses in and around the city, so they're clear about how to move in and around. I suppose what through COVID and then changes that have happened, what I'd hate to see is people continue to not come into the city. So we do need to shape it in a way where it's still an attractive place for people to come, but people need to be aware of how to move in and around the city. So yeah, just really wanted to support Bill's comments. Probably the other one I wanted, and it is a question, in terms of the movement plan, the removal of parking in and around the city, what impact does this plan have on street parking?
So I'll just cover off that community conversation perspective. So we've very much been talking through on what the comms plan looks like for implementation of this movement, and it's looking like at the moment, rather than publishing specific maps in the paper, because you'd look at a map and then once you're actually in the car you forget the map, it's more about reminding people that there is change there, but making sure that the signage actually, once they get to the change, is well understood. And we're also looking at how we have traffic controllers on site during that initial few days to week or two to make sure that that's well understood and can clarify it. Being that that is, so I have spent quite a lot of time over the last couple of weeks walking around businesses, and that is definitely a theme that's come through of that concern that it won't be well understood by the general public. So we are definitely taking that into great consideration for implementation. And I think there was one other, parking, yep. So as part of the enabling movement pilot project, we are removing 14 car parks. That's mostly to enable for better bus connection around the northern end of town. At the moment, we're expecting to give back also a number of car parks from other areas where there were bus stops or other broken yellow lines. Can't confirm exactly what that net offset is, so we're just developing that detail, but it's a lot less parking removal than traditional approaches like this. The next stage of this movement plan will be quite a lot of engagement with the community on working out what the streetscape, knowing that we have what the framework looks like from a permanent sense. We know what movement we want to get down each corridor, what that streetscape and what that space is used for. So car parking versus additional pedestrian connectivity such like. So that will be a permanent project engagement focus.
And then just in terms of implementation, I assume this is going to be staged over a period of time, not just.
So the pilot project is those key streets are within we're looking at within 3 weeks. So that's very minor concrete physical works, but a lot of painting and planters, and ensuring that we get that greenery along with that colour in those planters. The longer term vision of implementation is included within the city centre transport development long-term plan item. So that's over the next 10 or so years, with staging being developed currently to make sure that key corridors connect into the on completion of key projects around the city centre.
So that's to clarify that the movement changes, that is the one-way streets, etc. That will happen pretty rapidly.
Yep.
But you're using street furniture and markings and paintings, etc., which are temporary because it's a pilot. But the intention is that over the next 2 years, whilst that's in place, any construction then that happens within the CBD, those routes will be maintained.
That's correct. Yeah, we have.
So we're not going to have construction taking over a road and then that being closed, and it's that confusion, as Bill says. So this is trying to get movement that allows for some of the construction that's going to be happening, and you're doing it in a pilot way to make sure that it all works so that you can make changes accordingly. But essentially, we're looking for a semi-permanent movement plan that gives people certainty when they come to the CBD. Again, through the submissions, we hear from people saying, I don't come to the CBD because every time I come, there's a different road closed. So you're trying to get around that by having some certainty, and you're doing it temporarily to start with using street furniture and markings.
That's the real advantage that the pilot period gives us, is that in that we can use temporary emplacement, drag and drop is how I think about it. That means if we do need to drag it out of there, so a crane or a big digger or a truck or whatever for demolitions and construction needs to get in there, then that can be done without damage to permanent, expensive infrastructure. Then it also allows us to reroute traffic if needed in the CBD with the corridor access team, because there will be significant road space required for some of those construction activities, as we've seen along some of the newer builds on Cameron Road and in the CBD as recently as well. But it's better if they're going to back a truck into something and knock it over, that it's a temporary concrete pipe rather than something beautiful and expensive. We can get to that post that construction and development period for the permanent solution.
Sorry, I would just like to add that we can't guarantee 100% of the time because there will be, I'm sure, over some nights in particular, the need to close off a bit more road than what just that one lane does allow.
But you'd be looking to minimise that.
100%,
and keep it to nights, because I keep quoting Wellington, which has had huge works and will continue to, and they don't close off their streets unless they do it at night.
Absolutely.
I think you summarised it well, and this is a tactical intervention to give certainty to the public about how they're going to move around our city in the short term. We're doing it as a pilot so that we can make changes to ensure we get it right. And then there is already budget in the LTP to turn that tactical intervention into permanent infrastructure at some point in the future. We also have some other parts of town we might like to put some tactical intervention in at some point in the future, but right now we're focused on the ones that are outlined in this report. It'll only take 3 weeks to get the stuff in, and like both Tom and Sean said, we can move and tweak things very, very quickly, subject to making it work for our city centre.
I think I'm very supportive of what you're doing. I remember what the other question was. I'm just a bit confused by Harrington Street, where you show that is one way heading towards the Strand, and yet you've got a little arrow for direction of flow going the other way.
So that's just providing for exiting that car park in a very orderly fashion.
Okay. Okay, so it's sort of two-way. It's one way, but
for
you
that
can get
very small section of car park.
so it's two-way at the top.
At the top section,
Right,
yes.
okay. Anything else? Oh, Stephen, sorry. Thank you.
The story that
Have you got your mic on?
got massive construction planned and happening, or happening and planned. The reality is the city is going to be difficult to move around because of that. It would be nuts to go and put a whole bunch of permanent solutions in place in the context of that. So what we have now is a situation where we can test some patterns of movement around the city in concert with the construction in a temporary kind of approach that can be changed as we learn and understand how that is working, so that when we get to the final solution, it will be a solution that works. I think it's smart use of money, it's smart use of planning, and it's smart to be doing this when we're effectively in a construction zone for the next X number of years. So I'm fully supportive, happy to move the recommendations, but echo the comments of all commissioners that the communication of why and the reasons for doing this is vital. Otherwise, we'll end up with a community that are concerned that all of the streets have been turned upside down. They don't understand, why and what for. I noted your comment, Sean, around not necessarily running with maps, but actually in the communication. The first thing I did when I read this paper was to go to the map and work out how I was going to do my trip into the city in my head on the map. And I think most people would tend to do that. So I support the signage approach, but that will only reinforce for me when I get there that the trip that I've decided I'm going to do that way works. So I think we've got to do both. Communication on this will be vital.
Thank you. And we'll take that on
So
board.
you're moving that. Are you happy just in that D to put the word pilot in before project? You'll second that, Bill.
So, Chair, I just wanted to come back to one of your previous comments in terms of, again, providing certainty for people to move around the city, knowing that the roads or the routes will be open. I understand from time to time there might be the need to close something for a particular construction activity at night or a weekend or whatever, but it doesn't become the norm that, to be blunted, has in the past in some areas of the city centre. So absolutely critical in terms of that certainty for people.
I think our ability to, when someone takes over car parks, we're only able to charge them for the parking, aren't we?
Yeah,
That's all, just a parking charge. And that really doesn't reflect the disruption to people. That's, that's just a small amount. And in some cases, we don't charge them at all and they take over. So we're quite hot on that. But I think where you've got is sensible. Are you notifying Google of this?
We will be.
That's really important. So many people use Google to work out how they're going to get anywhere. So we need to make sure that Google reflects this. All right. Anything else? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
speed management plan. Oh, you're a lot here
Sure.
today. aren't you?
Yeah, a
It's
lot of
sort like
transport. Yeah.
your meeting, really.
And this is another one of those where not just the rules of the game are changing, but the objectives of the game is changing. And following the change of government, there's been an instruction to take a close look at the speed management plan. So under the old rules had that 40% of schools should have 30 kilometres in place by the 30th of June, and the rest of them by the end of 27. Now, there's been a directive from the new government that is now not mandatory, but it's still supported for funding if we do choose to go ahead with it. So in the bigger picture of the whole speed management plan for the city, we are suggesting to take the foot off the throttle, excuse the pun, and focus in the first instance on schools, marae, and the city centre. There's been a lot of engagement with schools already. There's a level of expectation, I guess, and many of them are promoting lower speeds outside the school. So, in essence, we're proposing to go ahead with a small part of those citywide changes that are related to these spots. And I thought,
if I could just
Sean
add,
here
the
to
next step is to go out for public consultation and work out what their view is. So using Western Bay of Plenty as an example, they went out end of last year with a fairly ambitious speed management plan, and they are now looking at implementing a very school town centre focused speed management plan.
So they went out under the old rules.
They went out under the old rule. Yeah.
Look, the two things, first of all, I think we need to be explaining to people what this VSL is, because the average person, again, won't know what they are. That means I'm assuming it's those electronic signs that show you that aren't on all the time. So when school starts and when school finishes, that's when the speed drops. Are they on through the whole day? I don't travel past my local school.
Not on through the whole day.
Okay. And so it would be good to explain that. The second question that I'm going to ask is why 30? Many schools currently have 40. So has 40 proven, and I think that's a question that the public will ask, I understand the difference between hitting a child at 30 versus 40 will be considerable, but have we had, where schools have currently a 40 kilometre per hour limit outside them, has that continued to see lots of accidents, which is why they're then suggesting that 30 is a better speed?
So it very much is an acceptable risk kind of approach. So as a bit of research done in Australia, the reduction in speed in death and serious injury for 40 kilometres an hour is 25%, whereas the death and serious injury rate or risk at 40 kilometres an hour is 58%, whereas at 30 kilometres an hour, it's only 25%. You've also got the add-on of your stopping distance is a whole lot less. And
understand the theory.
Yep.
I'm asking for, have we in the discussions we've had with schools, well, first of all, do we have any schools that currently have 40?
So we do have schools that currently have 40. The level of compliance at 40 is fairly low based on it's only a 10 kilometre an hour difference. Often you then need some kind of physical infrastructure to push that speed.
I think that's going to improve if you make it 30, do you? The level of compliance.
It will, based on the fact that actually at a 10 kilometre an hour, when it's only that small difference, you only take your foot off the accelerator slightly, and it actually equals more like a 3 kilometre an hour speed reduction. So it's that physical mindset of it's actually a significant change rather than it's just somewhere about the same.
And the fine, if you're caught, would be much greater because you're 20, 10, 15,
Significant.
20K over. Okay, yeah, all right. Do we have any schools in where there's 100K past them?
No, not on our network. There is, I think it's Tauranga Primary on the State Highway network. I don't think that's even 100, so.
That's a,
Just a comment, Chair, in terms of presumably once you've, the engagement's been done, you'll be coming back to us with a proposition. As part of coming back, it'll just be helpful in terms of where the Western Bay have landed, just to get an understanding of what's happening in the wider area.
And the consultation that you do, you talk to the schools, do you talk to the neighbours around the schools, or is it just with the actual schools? Because they would say, yes, of course, they want to keep their kids safe. How broad is your consultation around the schools?
So our proposal was to go out community wide for.
Yep. So the VSL 30K on Cameron Road adjacent to the domain, and that would only be used when there's events. Yeah. And that's the beauty of the VSL, which is more expensive.
Yes, it's a significant cost difference to a standard metal sign.
Why you want to take advantage of the funding being there if we want to implement it. Yep. Okay. Fair enough. That's good. Oh, okay, yes, yes. So that's to continue developing the plan and consult. Yep. Seconder for that? Shared? So Bill moved, shared, seconded. A and B1 to continue. I think it makes perfect sense to continue. If the money's there. Yeah, sure.
So just in terms of that consultation, so talking to the schools, but also the marae communities as well?
Yes, correct.
Right, anything else? I expect that this will have great interest from the public, which is why we're asking a lot of questions, I guess. Okay, all those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thanks very much, Sean. Order of candidates' names for the election in July. I think there's a huge hesitancy from the commissioners to interfere in any way with the elections. And our answer to you would probably be, whatever you've done before, keep on doing.
Thank you, and that would be random order, which we've been doing since 2007.
So could we change the recommendation then to state that the order of candidates' names on the voting documents for the Tauranga City Council election on 20 July 2024 and any subsequent by-elections be using the method the method of the last election?
Which is random order.
Yeah.
We do have to
So that we're not specifying it, rather we're making it very clear that we're just continuing on what's been done before, because I'm happy to move that. I would be nervous about the wording being taken to be dictating.
As long as the words random order are in there somewhere in the resolution, that'd be fine.
Well, it wouldn't be, because it would be what was used in the last election.
I think it then which was random order. So I think we have to specify that in the last elections it was random order. But yes, that's fine.
And are we required to specify it in the Act?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can we put in random order in brackets? Just to make it doubly clear? So instead of saying, I think I'm paranoid. I'm not. I've been through a few elections. All right, so moved by me, seconded by Bill. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. That brings us to the executive report. Okay, well, before we get to that, let's take a break and come 5-minute break. We're back at 11. We're on that. Really interesting, just reading through all those submissions on traffic. Stephen's absolutely right. People just think, too many roadworks. Should have done this before.
Fix it overnight, please.
Yeah, fix it without disrupting us.
Exactly.
And yeah, take away the roadworks. Some people just say, stop doing the roadworks and it'll all be fine. And you think, really? Yeah.
Yeah, well, we didn't do any roadworks for 5 years.
No, that's right. I mean, they are right.
Prior
but
to
stuff
your
should have
arrival,
been
you're
done.
right, prior to your arrival,
Yeah.
we weren't.
Okay, so meeting is resumed. Executive report and infrastructure is first up. Stephen, welcome.
Thank
You ready?
Yes, I am. I'll cover some of it, but Nick's got the really juicy bits. So I take it you've read the report. I'll probably pick out a few sort of highlights from my perspective that you might want to hear about. So in the sustainability and waste area, the climate and sustainability team is running some internal roadshows this first quarter with around 20 key teams in the organisation, so that they're fully aware of the kind of things that we do as an organisation to be successfully moving more and more into the sustainability space, and the kind of decisions people are making, bringing into their business and activity areas. And I think that's an invaluable thing to be getting people onto the same page and thinking about every aspect of work they do in this organisation and how it can align with that sustainability plan. So that's a really good piece of work. In the water space, the good news is, our Water Watchers initiative that we got underway 2 years ago when the environment was under high stress, and we've moved along and fine-tuned it over time. I think that the big thing there to note is that we should be thanking our community for the way they've responded. Their behavioural change and the way they've seen the Water Watchers is actually, this is a good thing. It's about trying to use water efficiently and looking after our environment. So that together with, we've entered a favourable wet cycle, so the streams have recovered significantly. But so we're tracking well within that 7-day average of trying to operate under 50,000 cubic meters a day, which is really good. It's really thanks to the community also responding, and it's part of their life now. They've adopted it. Those would be my two highlights, but
Thanks for that. I think what it shows is that you put responsibility back on people with good information. They generally make pretty good decisions, and I think we've seen that with Water Watchers, and people value water rather than needlessly waste it. I think the team's doing great work on the rainwater. Had some really good comments from the public on that. I've just wondered if you could give us a bit of an update on Papamoa's water. We had problems before Christmas, and then there's problems again currently, but the staff are saying that the water's safe to use and to drink, but it has got an odour and it has got a slight discolouring. Is that right?
yes, no, it's no discolouring. It's just the taste and odour, which is as a result of dissolved organics that come out of the catchment. Unlike our two other plants, which we've been operating for well over 50 years, and we know the raw water in those catchments, and we also own large parts of the catchment for afforestation. This catchment is new to us, and so the Waiari, yes. And but what we have done is we've implemented some dosing of activated carbon in the short term and when you operate that efficiently, it does remove all of those. It was an initiative the team put together really hastily when we realised that there was this odour and taste in the water, but importantly it's been tested safe to drink. There's no bacteriological issues, and we've been keeping closely in contact with obviously Taumata Arawai, our regulator, but also Phil Schumack from the local Ministry of Health to ensure that there isn't some sort of background issue, and everything is fine. So we will probably be looking at more permanent dosing in that regard in the future. So yeah, it's a seasonal thing that we haven't come across before.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Just a comment in terms of Cameron Road. Had a heap of positive comments and actually using it over the holiday period and right up. Recently, particularly in the weekends, the number of people in terms of walking and cycling, I've been really heartened by that level of activity. But certainly in terms of what we've ended up with in time the plantings grown, some of it needs improvement, which we have had some discussions about. I think it will be quite an impressive corridor. So I just wanted to note in terms of the commentary that I've had from residents and ratepayers on that since completion.
I had an approach from someone at the cricket who said, thank you very much. I know it's been painful, but I can now cross the road safely to the supermarket, which I haven't been able to do in the 25 years that I've been living here. So, yeah, it's good to get those comments because we had lots of difficulties.
Just a couple of comments on transport, and Stephen, you thanked the community. I also wanted to extend a thanks to the community who took heed of our messaging over the weekend. We were quite aggressive on the messaging to use alternative modes or work from home, anything to get less volume on the network today and tomorrow. And we've had a very good response actually. So I just wanted to extend a thanks to the community for listening to that message and doing what they can to lower the pressure on the network. We had a tricky hour between 8 and 9 this morning and congestion, but it would have been so much worse because of the combination of the unplanned event on 29A in combination with the works that we've going on Tortara Street. But overall, it's working better than I had dared to hope for. So huge thanks to travellers, or as the case may be, non-travellers today and tomorrow, and also thanks to the Wakakatahi crew. They've been going 24/7 since Friday night, and there's no doubt about their commitment to getting this 29A issue fixed as quickly as possible, and also to our T-top crew they've manned our operation control centre and tuning lights and doing everything they can to help as well. So we've got control over the network.
And that's you think that will last tomorrow? So people are being asked to work from home today and tomorrow. What about Wednesday? I heard on the radio until Wednesday, but I wasn't sure whether Wednesday was a work from home day or we thought it would be largely okay.
Yeah, so we 29A, if we look at that in isolation, we may actually get to conclude that work tonight. But we can't quite hang our hat on that yet. So that'll still be up in the air.
Work from home.
So we would like to keep the message out there, unless you hear otherwise. Basically, stick with the messaging that we've got, and particularly then for the Mount area, travelling to the city centre or out from the city centre out east. The Tortara one will not be completed tomorrow. So that issue still remains until Wednesday, but we may have good news on the 29A issue by this evening.
Thanks, Nick. I did have a comment as well. I'm just supporting Bill and Anne's comments. Yeah, I've had some really positive feedback about the completion of Cameron Road, so I just wanted to pass those on. but also thinking about Cameron Road. So now that it's, fully operational, subject to some of those other areas we're still working on, would be useful to understand, pre and post works, how people are using the corridor, but also the number of vehicles, travel times. We know that travel times are going to be slower because of all the traffic lights, but would be useful to understand how it's working and, what we planned and intended for that corridor and how it was going to be used, whether that's actually eventuated. So it'd be good to understand the pre and post about how Cameron Road's been used. If we could get some information on that, that would be good.
Yeah, we certainly can. So it is actually part of the formal business case process. So projects are based on benefits and costs, and what we have to do after a project is completed is to go back and I guess recalibrate what the real scenario is in relation to what was planned. So we will follow that up closely. It's not, you can't do it just at project completion, and I can't from the top of my head say the timing of this, but for people to get the behaviour change that's needed for us to see those real results coming to fruition will take a number of months, but I would say within 12 months we would have a very good idea, so we can report back on that.
Thing is, when we came, and Cameron Road project was already underway when we came in, but when it was explained to us, it was going to be block by block side of the road. So what it's shown is that when people could see it completed, they liked it. And again, it just reinforces, we just went too far with too much and people couldn't see it. We didn't seem to have that completion block by block. So stage 2 is definitely in broken down into 5 different stages, but also think about how it can be done in a way that people can actually see what it looks like. Even if within a stage we're able to do it block by block, so that you get a bit finished, and that gives people hope, I guess. Certainly with stage 1, but they can see what it is we're trying to achieve.
Yes, and that's one of the big learnings from Cameron Road Stage 1 is that it was probably more of an in-ground services project than it was a transport project. We had relied on a piece of technology to identify the services in the ground. We found that wasn't very accurate and had a lot more to deal with, and that's why block after block were opened and not completed, because there were significant issues with redesigns that had to be done on the fly, basically to get those to completion. So we're going about stage 2 in quite a different fashion and having complete designs before we start.
Anything else on, give Stephen a hard time here from infrastructure? No? Okay, community services, Barbara?
I'm reading through the report now. It seems all a bit historic because it's a lot of stuff that we did over Christmas. But a couple of the paragraphs that I'd like to highlight is the fact that we've got a kiosk in Punamana at the Mount Hub, so that council payments can be actually made through a kiosk. We had planned on having that installed quite a bit earlier in the year, but the model that we bought that wasn't able to be used by people in wheelchairs, so we sort of had to go back and do a lot of redesign. So work really closely with our accessibility people in the organisation. I think we've come up with a really good option, and obviously we'll be monitoring that for further insulation around other places, and it could go as wide as anywhere really. It could go in a mall or anything, so we'll monitor that and come back on that one. The other thing that I guess you'll be pleased to see is that finally we found a solution to dual name Latin Park. Yes, so we found a cost-effective way to do the dual naming. One of the issues with that was it was copper on steel naming, so I hope it looks good. So happy to answer any questions.
Been a busy time for your department, and when I think of last Christmas, and the emails that I was getting over the Christmas period which were largely about unmown berms, the look of the city, and the untidiness. What a difference this year. In fact, again, at the cricket, I got compliments on how good the city was looking and how well cared for it was looking. And of course, the thing that I had the most comments on has been the walkway. I don't know about anyone else, but the Marine Parade walkway is just the jewel in the crown. It's just amazing, the number of people that talk about it and used it. And someone said to me on Sunday at the cricket, the best thing I've seen is people in wheelchairs who are able to enjoy that have never been able to before. So, really well done to the staff and the team that got that up and running. Oh.
And certainly echo your comments about the walkway. So it doesn't matter what time you're over there. There are people, cycles, push chairs, whatever on it. A question, Barbara, in terms of the concerts, and we had 3 over that New Year period, and then there was one at anniversary weekend. Do we do then any assessment in terms of the economic impact of those concerts?
Yep, so this is the question that Stephen has been asking, and we've actually got a presentation, I think it's this week, Alistair, from a firm that actually can assist us with that. They're actually quite expensive to do afterwards, so the staff do selected ones when they're going through that grant process. So we're actually looking at how we can engage a firm to assist us to do some assessment on what's the economic benefit for the community. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that for the first 6 months of this year, within a month or two, and provide that information to you.
Because it's not just the wider community in terms of the interest, in terms of that vibrancy with the city centre, given the amount of investment that's gone in and going into that. Just the other thing around concerts, which is important, is that long lead-in, so people are aware that they are happening, and if they don't like the noise or whatever, they have an opportunity to go elsewhere. And I had some of those conversations recently. So I think that lead-in and publicity around when they're happening is actually quite important. And I do know people who made that decision. Oh, we're going somewhere for anniversary weekend, because in terms of the concert. So
that's a good point. I think that most of them are regular, but like all of us, you sort of forget, don't you, year on year. So the more we can advertise, the better.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Just like everybody else, I've been using, I think, all of our facilities. We had a walk along did the whole boardwalk yesterday. Not our facility, but I went out to Papamore Hills just after New Year's, and the upgrades out there are awesome. And then also all Manawa Falls. So, there's some great amenity in and around our city, which makes this place a great place to live. The question that I did have was, and I heard it this morning when we were talking about the events and things happening down the Mount, and I just quickly had a look in our action investment plan for events. There's a goal in there about to develop a strategic and collaborative approach to priorities for investment in major events and business events. And thinking about all of the sports events, which I don't mind. I mean, every time I'm down the Mount, every weekend there's something on, the triathlon, the surf lifesaving, the volleyball. But I actually heard this through when we were at Mowal Trust from the chair. No, actually from one of the members sitting around the table, is actually how do we balance out some of this stuff with some of our other reserves? So not everything needs to be done down the Mount. How do we spread some of that activity, some of those events in and around the city, where I know the Mount's a great place to run events, but actually how do we get some balance across the network and across our city? But coming back to that goal, and I think there's an action in there about developing something along those lines.
Some really good comments. If I guess I start on Omanawa because that's the easiest one to answer. Is that we invested a considerable amount of money and got a lot more expensive than anybody anticipated at the start. But it's just amazing. The 758 steps. It's an amazing asset for our community. In relation to the strategic direction for events, it's something that Nalita and I have been talking about for the last couple of months because of that goal. How do we bring together the balance of where are we having events, how many events, because there's only so much resource that we've got to support the events that we are supporting in the town, and what's the future direction? What does, as a commission, what are you looking for from us? When looking to run, to host and encourage more events to come to town. So we are working on that. I don't have an answer for you right now, but I can certainly commit sort of about April to bring something back to the commission for you to consider.
But that's why we're creating parts of Te Manawataki or Te Papa, to be able to hold more events in the centre of the city, and that's why the car parking on the Strand is going to be in a big lawn that you can have major events on, so that we are creating those spaces adjacent to the water, which obviously people like. So that's a big part of that, but that's why I raised before that the closure of those streets and the access to those businesses, it is constant. One thing about the walkway is I think it has enabled us to move some of it further down.
Activity, yeah.
Down the landscape, down the beach. But it would be good to see what your thinking is.
Gareth wanted to say something as well, but just before you do, also when we're considering the active reserves and the way we're realigning our activities within those reserves, events are always part of that thinking.
Yeah, I sit on the event funding panel with Barbara, and one of the criteria in the event funding framework is giving priority and preference to events that aren't in some of our more popular places. So purposefully trying to drive events away from places like Mount Maunganui or some of the more used parks in the city. Look, I wouldn't say it's been necessarily that effective because people will just go where they want to go to put on their events, but there is incentive there for people to use our other spaces if they are so inclined. We're trying.
Another question, in terms of Omanawa, it would be quite good to, at some point, whether it's the next executive report or beyond that, in terms of the number of people actually going out there, just to get a sense in terms of that use.
I did have a comment from someone, again at the cricket, that they'd been past and the car park was full. Yeah,
I've heard that a few times that they've been out. People have been out there, but we can get some information. And one thing that we have done is that there's still that risk of people going down to the bottom platform. They just about have to go cross country to get there, but they are doing that. So we've actually added a camera that actually has a message. The camera is as a sensor camera, and actually when they sense somebody there, they send out a message that you shouldn't be here to go away. So we'll provide some data on the success of Omanawa Falls.
Stephen.
Thank you. Look, I think it's fantastic reading through the report and seeing how many initiatives are now coming to fruition. And if you combine that with the volume of events that are going on in the city, in terms of achieving our objective of a vibrant city, then I think we're well on that path. So congratulations to the whole team for that. But I do think, and I'm glad to hear that we have reporting underway to analyse the impact, even if they are expensive. So often when we come to make investments, we always get the sentiment that there's no payback and it's not worth doing and they're nice to haves and all of that sort of sentiment. And you can see quite a bit of that coming through in the LTP submissions. So I think it's really important that we both do the work and tell the story about what the payback has been. And Mana was just but one example. The walkway, when you look at that over on the mount, the volume of, I came into the city at lunchtime yesterday and drove up Marine Parade, and it's just amazing the activity along that whole corridor. And it's just opened up right the way down on the beach, whereas in fact, it was interesting when I got to the mount, it was far less busy than it normally would have been. And clearly people are just moving right the way down. That's an enormous dividend to the city. A lot of it is not measurable. So hence the importance of telling the story around that and having as many numbers as we can attach to it as we can. So I look forward to those reports coming through.
And we shouldn't forget the recent test at Bay Oval and the Black Clash, which was the third most watched television in the past 12 months. But those views of Tauranga over 5 days of cricket, I don't know, the economic benefit of that if you had to buy that sort of advertising. And the weather was just perfect, these blue skies, and it was just amazing. So they certainly do the city a great deal of good, but also bring people here who spend money. All right, okay, done with that. Chief Financial Officer. There's a typo, is there?
Yes, I was going to take that to your attention, but yes, it's 7.4%, not 74% increase in traffic volume through the airport. Still remains issues of Air New Zealand in terms of their, I think it's a 3 to 4 year program of A320 work. To get any extra capacity is hard.
It did come up at the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum. So Rotorua are having similar issues with services. Whakatane Airport sort of raised it. They're a different, dealing with a different airline, but certainly the issue of air services into the Bay of Plenty is an ongoing issue.
So outside of the airport, finance had its biggest months through the latter part of last year, which is good in the sense that there's a lot of work going on in the city and record payments going out. And then the other thing just to bring to your attention is just on, so this year is scheduled for a general revaluation.
It is residential.
Residential and commercial, the revaluation. Additional information going back and forth between the Office of Auditor General and the valuers. So with another revisit to that on the 23rd of Feb, I think it is. So still at this stage, looking on track for this year. In the absence of that occurring, the reval will be delayed, but it's just a matter of working through the questions that are coming through there.
So would that take effect on people's rates from July next year?
July 24, yes.
Or this year?
Yeah.
This year?
That's right, July 24. It will be tight, otherwise it'll be delayed a year. And the important thing is like there's no the impact is in terms of distribution of rate.
Yeah.
So not total rates. No.
Oh. Okay, money.
Sorry, 1 July 24 for the 24-25 financial year. That's right.
Shared.
Thanks, Paul. Just a quick question about the car park over there. So when's the completion date for the car park? Over at the over at the airport.
It's just come through. I'm asking Ray exactly the same question. So another 100 were open last Friday, and the rest should be another 6 to 8 weeks.
In terms of this relates to the lighting and navigation, etc. Paul, did we take that over from Airways Corporation?
Correct.
It's a wee bit scary to think that such critical elements are being left without the required maintenance over a period of time and renewal.
Yes, and the plus side now is that with us taking that over and the upgrades is that there will be a lot less bad weather diversions than we've had in the past.
Okay.
So that's what we were seeing happening in the past environment. So it's good.
And just going back to the revaluation, is an orange audit status, does that happen often?
As far as I'm aware, it's the first since I've been here, but it's also reflective of that we're bringing it forward to go out of cycle to some degree because there is so much pressure on that sector in terms of getting these valuations through. So I think there's an element of the function of just so much going on and so much growth that's reflected in that happening. But the team are confident they can work it through.
I really just wanted to acknowledge the significance of that 75 million payment going out. That's $75 million into the Tauranga city economy. It's jobs, employment. That's a significant investment by the city in the economy and growth of the city. People often talk about the negatives, and the LTP springs to mind once again, but they fail to acknowledge the amount of investment that is going in the city that is circulating right across the economy, providing work for small business, large business, industrial business, and all of the suppliers and services that enable that to occur. That's really important. And it's easy to get overlooked in a monthly report, but the significance needs to be recognised.
Strategy, growth and governance.
Very straightforward, so I'm happy to take it as read and just answer any questions.
Anything in there?
There's a comment, Chair. Obviously, our communications regarding the candidate information evening seems to be getting out there because I've actually had a number of people who were, some of them I was surprised that they had come across it, but certainly that messaging has certainly got out there.
Good number registered. It's a good number registered.
The numbers are good and they're still rolling in, so we're expecting to have quite a few people in attendance, which is great.
Excellent. Been encouraging people to put their names forward or think about putting their names forward, and they are, obviously. It's a great job. Anything else? I think what we signalled today is that after we've had the long-term plan hearings, we need a bit of a debrief on the process and how it's managed. Corporate services, Alistair.
Just a couple of highlights. Firstly, there's a new activity group introduced in this report. It's performance monitoring and assurance. You should see over a period of time this report to include performance measurement components inside the executive report flowing through. They may be included in other areas or just within this. To make a start, there's a couple of images in there of internal portals the team have set up. One is tied to financial performance dashboards that as managers you can click on in real time to know how you're doing. The other is transport insights, just aggregating a lot of data we've had across the organisation. The other is there's a concept called a digital twin. There's a photo there of the water treatment plant in Oropi. The idea is that if you have a digital version of a building, you can predict where equipment's located, what might need to change in the future. You can even model changes based upon using a digital version rather than physically making the changes. A couple of other highlights in the report. We had 200 staff attend some training for contractor management in November and December. And we've also been taking the teams through the new building and what it will be like to work in different neighbourhoods. So new ways of working, that excitement, but also the reality of making it better than where we are right now. And then finally, we've had a couple of over 100,000 audience hits in December. So the Marine Parade Coastal Pathway, it isn't just anecdotal. The data tells us it's been one of the most successful online stories that we've had in a while. And also the long-term plan campaign, we reached 158,000. So good numbers touching the community.
One of the things that we do have to have a look at, and again, a debrief on the long-term plan will I think we'll bring it up, but the use of graphs, which we're, pushing to move to, it doesn't matter whether you're online or it's printed, they're unreadable. And with the four of us, we've managed, we've coped because we can ask questions. But if you go back to a fully elected council, we're going to have to do something about the quality of those, because you just can't read the writing. That lovely water graph, I mean, we look at the graph, but you can't read the writing underneath. So, and it doesn't matter whether you're online or whether it's printed out. So we do need to have a think about how we present that, so that all your councillors can read it, understand it, because you'll be 3 times the number.
We have some time, so look, we'll make the most of that time to get this right.
Stephen.
Absolutely delighted to see the formation of the Performance Monitoring and Assurance Group, and I've been working with Alistair on some of the KPIs and how they might be presented, Alistair and his team, and I really look forward to seeing that come through. I think it's going to be really important for the new council in particular, and the stronger that information is and the better that it's presented, the better will be their understanding and getting up to speed with the core issues. And it's also an opportunity to really focus the mind on what is really important. So I think that's going to be an incredibly important tool for the new council coming in. But I was the one that probably complained the most about the graphics. I do actually appreciate and use graphics a lot, but these so often they're fuzzy pictures at best. And even just, I think it would be timely to have a think about whether or not Stellar is the right reporting mechanism. I find it clumsy to use. I can't open more than one window at a time. Commenting is cumbersome and slow to the extent I no longer make comments. I just read it through and make notes separately. Yeah, I think it's timely for a review of that. I'm sure there's better quality board paper processes available.
Bill.
Just following on from Stephen's comment, and I think that's even more critical in terms of the move to a fully elected council and in terms of the level of service in this area that is provided to elected members. And as Anne has said, there's only 4 of us, and generally have a pretty good understanding of a number of the matters coming before us. But the governance group's going to be significantly larger, and certainly could well be a number of new people. So it's having that right level of technology to actually help them. I just wanted to, and I'm in legal risk and procurement. I was quite taken in terms of that contract extension that Waka Kotahi have granted in terms of improvements to our contracting and procurement processes. Seems a good signal. Yeah. I was just wondering, what were the 2 or 3 key elements in terms of improvements to that process that obviously gave Waka Kotahi confidence to do something that they obviously
usually
don't do? No.
Bill, the first thing I'd say is that the relationship with Waka Kotahi, moving it from not only being technical but being strategic and commercial, instills trust and confidence that the council's able to manage longer term contracts. The second is that Waka Kotahi's processes for funding, if we just pass an audit or if we just do things the minimum, there's less likelihood that we'll get longer term. But we've invested in having more people trained in how to apply for funding, how to meet the Waka Kotahi procurement standards. We have a dedicated resource on procurement of transport. And it's through that relationship that there's more confidence. I don't know if the service model's changed. I don't know if the community's seen a marginal improvement yet, but you're more likely to get that over a longer term contract for maintenance.
Anything else? Okay, Sarah, regulatory and compliance. I have to say, it's a much better read. Well done.
Thank you. The team will appreciate hearing that. That was one of the first points I just wanted to make, was that our statutory timeframe performance continues to improve. So for November and December in the 80s, which is excellent. On paragraph 114, we have for the first time tried to include data on how our building numbers or dwelling numbers are performing against the smart growth housing demand projections. And apologies, those are really difficult to see, the numbers there.
I can't see them.
No, you can't.
I have difficulty even getting the colours to tell me what they were, but I've assumed.
You can see the orange there is the CCCs, which we are using the code compliance certificates as a proxy for the number of new dwelling units. And so it's not precise, but it's the best information that we've got. And that shows that through 2023, we issued approximately 900 CCCs against expected dwellings numbers from smart growth of about 1,100. So there is a shortfall there. But what we will do is continue to report this data in every executive report so that you've got that and you can see how it's tracking.
So is the grey line what smart growth?
That's the smart growth projections.
Smart growth projection.
Yeah. And that's just normalised every month so that we could break it down so you can see that visually.
It is. And then the blue line is what?
That's the building consents that have been granted. And you know there's the timing difference between a building consent being granted and a CCC. That can sometimes be up to 2 years. So that's the difficulty in the data. But
we really want that above the grey line.
Because that blue line being low last year means that our CCCs will be low this year.
Yeah. No, it was really, I mean, that's what I assumed it was. It's really good to see that because it just tells you we are losing ground.
There's lots of factors involved in that, and particularly in the last 2 years has been market conditions. And the other update I just wanted to note is we have said that our IANZ assessment was nearly there, but we actually have cleared all of our non-compliances. So our accreditation continues as the Building Consent Authority, and our next assessment won't be until September 2025.
Good. So do we have any way, because we have no tools to make developers bring to the market the sections that they've subdivided, do we have any way of showing how many sections there are actually sitting for which we've had subdivision approval, but they haven't issued a building consent? To get that picture that needs to go with this as to how much available land there is where a house could be built, but actually no one's put a building consent in. So that's just, because when I drove around Papamoa, there is actually still land there, that the developers decide when the market's right and they bring to the market.
So I was checking with Andy about that direction. So the development trends report that we do every year identifies land that is zoned and serviced, but for which there is still development capacity you could put houses on. And then we do an assessment around the likelihood of that. So Andy can just probably give you a bit more detail, but yes, we do have that information.
Yeah, we do. There's a number of categories of land, I suppose. There's sections that have been created that haven't yet been built on. There's land that's been somewhere through the subdivision consent process. They might have applied, they might have had consent issued, but the subdivision hasn't been created. And then there's land that's zoned that hasn't even commenced that subdivision consent process yet. So it's just sitting there, can be developed in future. We have done some work previously to sort of break all that down, and we are monitoring that. I'm not sure if we've got sort of the numbers to hand, or else there might be a little bit of work to classify that again, but it's certainly something that can be delivered and something we can bring to you in future if that's what you want.
Is it difficult? I just wonder whether it's something you need sort of on a quarterly basis, so you've got a reasonable picture of where you are. It would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as you know, I pushed really hard to have this this graph in there, and its purpose is really to focus the mind. And that's quite scary when you see that blue line trending, starting to flat line almost. It means that CCCs in the future will be lower and we'll be even further away from our targets. That will inevitably roll through to higher house prices because supply is not meeting demand. And I think whilst there's a lot of things we can't control in this, there is a role that the council can play in discussions with the private sector and understanding what their barriers are and how we can work collectively to overcome them, because unless we have a sort of a collective response to the problem, we won't solve it. So those sort of quarterly reports, I think, would be really helpful in the context of those conversations. It's great to see this, and thank you for the work in putting it together. You could put up with maybe 1 year where your line, or 1 or 2 years where your lines don't meet, provided you could see over time that they kind of equalise. But actually, I don't think they are. And certainly in the next 5 years, we know we've already got a housing deficit of 5,000. We know projections show that that's going to continue to grow, and that's assuming we meet the targets. So if we don't meet those targets, then it's going to get even bigger and creates another sense of urgency.
So maybe quarterly. Is it too difficult to bring that?
Thinking it would be logical to bring it to SFR when we do the growth issues update, because those are all the actions that we're implementing to try to address it. So they seem to sit together, so we could bring them there. I think we do that on a quarterly basis as well, do we?
Correct. I think April will be the next report.
That would be good.
We'll try to get it to the next one.
Yeah.
Once again, thinking about a new council coming in, talking of focusing the minds, if we really want to deal with those issues that vex the city, then getting focus of the new council on housing and how the gap can be bridged will be really important.
Oh.
I'd just like to also acknowledge, mentioned to Sarah before the meeting in terms of the pleasing result in terms of the consenting process, both for building and resource consents. What I think it also highlights, because you've got in the building consents, it's been less applications, resource consents are increasing, is that ongoing challenge in terms of managing all of that, because in some ways it's trying to have some idea in terms of predicting, in terms of the resourcing available to make sure those consent numbers or consent approval or the processing of that continues to improve over time. But certainly well done to the team in terms of the effort in both of those areas. And I just wanted to do a shout out in terms of our parking officers, because often subject to a lot of criticism, but in terms of, helping members of the community and, for want of a better word, in their hour of need.
Anything else? You were doing a review of Freedom Camping. Doing a review of Freedom Camping sites. I think we asked.
That's correct. I think it's coming back to the next SFR meeting, the review of those areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? No. City development and partnerships.
Lucky last. I was on leave when this report got written, but I read it at 5 o'clock this morning, and
Scott.
It felt like business as usual for the group. A lot of great projects have been delivered. So, for example, the civic development team working really, really hard to open Tunks Reserve in Elizabeth Street East before Christmas, and we've come back in the new year to finish off some planting and tidy up a few bits and pieces. And the Dive Crescent car park fully completed now, just with a little bit of planting to do in the planting season. A large number of projects underway, some that will finish in the short term, some obviously a bit further down the track, but all tracking as planned. And I guess the only other thing I really wanted to highlight was the positive media impact score for the city centre work that we're doing. So 3.5 is a good score. The local government average is 2. So the messaging that we're getting out there about what we're trying to achieve in the city centre is having an impact. It's hard work getting that message through to everyone, but we're trying hard, and it feels like it's having a positive impact as a general rule. Always more work to do, always more great stories to share in terms of what we're doing and what we're achieving. But it was nice to get that result just before Christmas and see that on some level we are having an impact in terms of the bold decisions you've made and the work that the team are doing to implement them. So happy to take any questions.
Alongside that, to see, must be good for the staff who are working hard to get that activity going in the CBD, to see the foot traffic. Even though I can't read what's underneath, can't see where it is, but to see those increased foot traffic in the CBD.
Correct, and the only one that was down was outside 90 Devonport Road, which is obviously a construction site at the moment, but just finishing the wood on the 6th floor now, so cracking along at pace.
No, it's been a great summer in the city. Next summer will be even better. Any questions for Gareth?
A comment, Chair, and picking up your point, Gareth, carrying on a continuous basis, sharing those stories and what's happening. And it's not a one-off, and I agree, it's just continuing all of that across all of the media channels and those other opportunities. So well done on that work today in terms of the team.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we're a large organisation that is doing a lot of work, and so we do need to balance the good news stories in the city centre with what's happening right around the organisation, and it's hard sometimes to carve out a space to have your say, but we work really closely with the community relations team, obviously, to try as hard as possible to get every good news story as we've got to find someone that's interested in reading it. Yeah.
But again, with the pictures from the cricket as they panned around to the city to see the cranes, and they made the comment, a lot of the city's being reconstructed or something. I can't remember the exact words, but I mean, it's all grist to the mill. Show that the city is changing, despite what we might read in the long-term plan submissions, that it's dead and we should abandon it.
Yeah, the weather could not have been any more spectacular for the test, and like you say, those pictures showcasing the city were just money can't buy that, really.
I think it would be worthwhile sharing that graph that shows the pedestrian counts with the media who are here today, because I mean, these are dramatic increase in pedestrian counts year on year. I can't quite read the numbers, but they're sort of, along the Strand, 100% increase. That's not the story we were hearing at the end of last year. And I think the other one's the Strand as well, is it? That's up, 40%, something like that. So these are dramatic increases in pedestrian counts, notwithstanding all the developments going on. It's pretty noteworthy.
Yep, we do come up against a perception issue in the city centre on a relatively regular basis, where the perception is that council's taking car parks away, but we all know that as of today, there are more parks in the city centre than there were a year ago. We also know that any given time, there's always at least 20% capacity available in the Elizabeth Street car parking building and somewhere around 40% capacity available in the Spring Street building. So when you hear that I can't find a park, the actual data speaks to the fact that there are car parks available. A, you just need to pay for it, and B, you might have to walk a little bit further than you might like, but we're the 5th largest city in the country and the fastest growing city, and that's not really unreasonable. And I guess this data is along the same lines. People think that there's not that many people in the city centre, but the data suggests there's more. That doesn't necessarily make it, doesn't necessarily mean that businesses in the city centre aren't still struggling. But yes, data is useful to help tell the story about transformation for our city centre, and we'll try and use it as much as possible to help people understand that there are people in the city centre, there are car parks, and there are things to do. So come on in.
Shared.
Just picking up on that point, I think it might have been in the last report or the report before, we had some information on parking, the graphs showing occupancy and that kind of thing. I think that would be good to continue to, just so that we can monitor. Actually, there are, in terms of parking availability, whether it's off-street or off-street or on-street parking, that would be helpful. Just to kind of, balance that story. Like, as you said, there is parking available, but actually to put it into these reports, and then we can kind of report on it.
Thanks, we'll absolutely add that stuff back in.
We have the foot traffic and the car parking. Good, it's good evidence. Okay, anything else? Someone like to move then that we receive the exec report? Oh, everybody. Shared, moved, Bill seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. We have no late items in public. Can I have a motion to go into public excluded for the reasons outlined on the agenda? Shared and Bill, thank you.